We're drifting slowly into the timeline of the Backrooms, into the long, pale history of the place behind the walls of the world, the place you fall into when reality forgets to hold you. It is a story of empty rooms that go on forever, of a light that hums without kindness, of wallpaper the color of old teeth, and of the small, frightened people who learn to live in a country that was never meant to be lived in. Born in a moment of carelessness, in a glitch, in a wrong step through a floor that should have been solid. It began not with a scream, but with a soft, sick lurch, the feeling of the ground giving way, and then the sudden quiet of somewhere else. But beneath the emptiness, there was always something moving. Something that had been here longer than any of us. Something that watched from the corners of the endless yellow rooms and waited for company. This is the story of how a fool became a country, and how a country became a home, and how a home, for all its horror, still held onto the oldest human thing there is, the need to survive together, to leave a message on the wall, to say to whoever comes next, you are not the first, and you are not alone. So settle now. Let the room grow soft around you. Let your eyes close if they will, and drift with me, slowly, gently, down through the levels, from the first buzzing yellow hall to the deep places where even the maps run out. We will walk this road together, one quiet level at a time, and we will not hurry, for the halls are endless, and the night behind the walls is longer still, and there is time enough in the small hours to hear the whole of it. There is a particular hush over this history, the hush of a place with no windows and no clocks, where the light never changes and the day never comes, and yet people have lived here. People have loved here and traded here, and buried their dead in rooms that all look the same. Their footsteps have worn no path, for the carpet does not remember, but their words remain, scratched into the drywall, whispered from wanderer to wanderer, carried down the years like a candle passed hand to hand. Come with me now into the quiet behind the world, and let us hear how it all began. Perhaps it has always been happening. Perhaps since the very first walls were raised and the very first floors were laid, some small number of us have simply slipped, without warning, without reason, out of the solid world and into the hollow one behind it. They call it no clipping now, a word borrowed from games, from the trick of walking through a wall that was never meant to be walked through. And the name fits, for that is exactly how it feels. One moment you are standing in an ordinary place, a stairwell, a storeroom, a corner of your own home in the sleepless hours, and the next the floor is not there. You do not fall far, you fall through, and when the falling stops, you are somewhere that looks almost like the world you left, but wrong in every quiet way. The first of us to fall left no record, of course, for how could they? And so we cannot name them, cannot say when or where they lurched out of reality and into the yellow rooms. But we can imagine them, a tired soul in the small hours, leaning against a wall that had always held them, and then not holding them at all. The soft surprise, the moment of not understanding, and then the long, slow understanding that they were not going home. In those first fallings there was no map, no water, no word of comfort scratched into the drywall, no one who had come before to say what this was or how to endure it. There was only the hum and the light and the endless sameness and the dawning of a terror that has no shape, the terror of a place that does not care that you are in it. Perhaps some of them found their way out by accident, clipped back through some soft place in the floor and stumbled home, and never spoke of it, or spoke of it, and were not believed. And perhaps most did not. Perhaps most simply walked and walked and walked, until the walking became their whole life, until the world they had lost became a dream they could no longer trust, a warm rumor from before the hum began. They are the true first citizens of this country, these nameless early ones, and everything that comes after, every group and every map and every gallon of almond water is built quietly upon their unremembered suffering. The first thing anyone learns of the Backrooms is the yellow. It is the first level, the level they call zero, the level nearly everyone passes through when they first fall, and it is the color of the whole nightmare pressed into a single hue. Old wallpaper, the yellow of nicotine and neglect, of a room where someone smoked for 40 years and then died and was never found. It stretches in every direction, room opening into identical room, hallway folding into identical hallway, and there is no plan to it, no logic, no center and no edge that anyone has ever reliably found. The carpet is damp in a way that never dries, a moist mono-yellow carpet that gives faintly underfoot, and the air smells of old moisture, of mildew and stale water, the smell of a basement that flooded once and never truly drained. Above, the fluorescent lights buzz in their yellowed panels, and they never go out, and they never brighten, and their sound, that endless electric drone, is the sound the whole level makes, the sound that gets inside your skull and stays there long after you have left. This is level 0. This is where most of us begin, and its horror is not a monster, not at first, but the horror of scale, the horror of a place that has no end, where you may walk for hours, for days, and pass nothing but more of the same wallpaper, the same lights, the same wet carpet, until you begin to wonder whether you are moving at all, or simply dreaming the illusion of motion in a room that never changes. The early wanderers learned quickly that the mind is the first thing this place takes. Time comes loose here. Hunger comes strangely. The sameness works on you like a slow poison, and some, they say, simply stopped, sat down against the yellow wall, and did not get up again, undone not by any beast, but by the sheer, patient emptiness of the yellow country. And yet, this is also the level where hope first put down roots, for it is here that the almond water was found, and here that the first messages were left, and here that the first travellers, meeting by impossible chance in the endless halls, learned that they were not the only ones. The yellow country is the threshold. It is the mouth of the whole story, and through it, one by one, across all the years, we have all of us come drifting in. Let us dwell a moment on the sound, for the sound is half the terror. The hum of level 0 is not loud. It is worse than loud. It is constant, a low fluorescent buzz layered over a deeper, almost subsonic drone. The sound of a building's breath, the sound of unseen machinery running for no one. In the world we came from, silence is a rare and precious thing, a gift of the quiet hours. Here, silence is a trap, for the hum is always there, filling every gap, so that when it does falter, when it flickers, when a light somewhere down the hall dims or dies, the change is enough to stop the heart. The early wanderers learned to read the hum the way sailors read the sea. A steady buzz meant an empty level, or as empty as this place ever gets. A change in the hum, a new pitch, a distant knocking beneath it, meant something was near, something moving, something that did not belong even here. And there is a worse thing still, for on rare and dreadful occasions the hum stops entirely. The lights hold, but the sound falls away, and a true silence descends, a silence so total that you can hear your own blood, your own swallowing throat, the small dry click of your own dry eyes, The old accounts speak of this silence with real fear, for it never lasts, and what breaks it is never good. Sometimes it is a scream far off, human or not. Sometimes it is a footstep where no footstep should be, and sometimes the wanderers say, it is a voice, close and soft, saying your name in the tone of someone who loves you, someone who died, someone who is trying, very patiently, to make you turn a corner you should not turn. So they learned to fear the quiet, these first citizens of the yellow country, and they learned to keep the hum around them like a blanket, to stay near the lights, to move when it droned and to freeze when it changed. It is one of the oldest lessons of the Backrooms, older than the maps, older than the M.E.G, older than any group or law. When the hum stops, do not move. When the hum stops, do not answer. When the hum stops, close your eyes and wait and pray to whatever you still believe in, that the sound comes back before the thing in the silence finds you. In a country of endless dry rooms and stale, poisoned air, water is life, and water, in the ordinary sense, is nowhere to be found. And so it must have felt like a miracle, that first time some parched and failing wanderer found a bottle sitting quietly on the yellow carpet. An ordinary plastic bottle, half full, its label faded, its cap sealed. They drank because they were dying, and they did not die. Instead, something eased. The gnawing wrongness that the Backrooms puts into the body, the slow static of the place working on the blood, quieted. Their thoughts cleared a little, their fear settled, and they realized with wonder that this was not ordinary water at all. It tasted faintly of almonds, sweet and strange, and it did more than slake thirst. It pushed back, for a time, against the sickness of the place itself. They called it almond water for the taste, and it became the single most precious thing in all the Backrooms, more valuable than any weapon, any map, any comfort. Where it comes from, no one truly knows. It appears. It is found, tucked in corners, resting on shelves in the deeper levels, waiting as though left for whoever needs it most. And this alone is enough to make the wanderers uneasy. For who leaves it and why? And what does the place want in return? There are darker rumours, of course, that not all almond water is what it seems, that there is a false version, a look-alike that fills the same bottles and sits on the same shelves, and that this false water does not heal but ruins, that it clouds the mind, that it changes those who drink it into something that is no longer wholly themselves. And so the almond water, that one bright mercy, comes wrapped in its own quiet dread. For the wanderer who finds a bottle in the empty dark must ask, always, whether it is salvation or the sweetest of traps. Around this single substance, whole economies would one day grow, whole groups founded on its trade, whole wars fought for its supply. But in the beginning, it was simpler than that. It was one dying person and one bottle, and the small, staggering discovery that in the worst place in all creation, something somehow wanted them to live a little longer. It is the first kindness of the Backrooms, perhaps the only one, and we will follow it, this thin thread of mercy, all the way down through the story to come. Before the groups, before the outposts, before the maps that made the levels legible, there were only the wanderers alone, each one convinced they were the only living soul in all the endless rooms. Imagine it. You have fallen out of the world. You have walked for what might be days through halls that never change. You have found the almond water and it has kept you breathing, but it has not kept you sane, not entirely. For the sameness has been working on you. The hum has been singing in your skull, and you have begun to talk to yourself, to answer yourself, to hear replies in the buzz of the lights. And then, at the far end of a hallway that looks like every other hallway, you see a shape, a figure, a person, and your heart does a terrible thing, for it leaps with joy and freezes with terror in the same instant, because you have learned by now that not everything shaped like a person is a person. These first meetings must have been agonies of hope and dread, two wanderers approaching each other down the endless yellow, each one praying the other is human, each one ready to run. And when it was true, when they were both real, both lost, both human, the relief must have broken something open in them, a floodgate of grief and gladness, the simple animal comfort of another warm and frightened body in the dark. It is from these meetings that everything else grows. Two wanderers who found each other and did not die learned quickly that two survive better than one, that one can sleep while the other watches, that two sets of eyes see more of the treacherous halls, that a shared bottle of almond water and a shared story make the emptiness a fraction less unbearable. And so the pairs became small bands, and the bands, over years and levels, became the seeds of the great groups to come. But we should not rush past these first ones, these solitary early wanderers, for their loneliness was a particular and terrible thing, a loneliness deeper than any the surface world can hold, the loneliness of being lost not in a forest or a desert, but in a place that should not exist at all. Many of them never found another soul. Many of them walked their whole remaining lives alone, and died alone, against the yellow wall, and the only trace they left was perhaps a single line scratched into the drywall, a name, a date, a warning, the first faint writing on the walls of the world behind the world. The dead of the backrooms leave little behind, for the carpet keeps no path, and the rooms do not remember, but they leave one thing, and it is the most human thing of all. They leave words, scratched into the drywall with a key or a knife or a broken nail, smeared in whatever came to hand, written in pen where a pen could be found. The words of the early wanderers cover the walls of the older levels like the growth rings of the country's slow history. Some are warnings, turn back, do not go left here. The thing comes at the third light. Some are maps, crude and desperate, arrows and scrawls that try to make sense of a place that has no sense, most of them wrong, most of them leading only deeper. Some are simply names, the names of the lost, written by their own hands, or by the hands of those who loved them, so that some trace, however small, would remain of a soul the world had swallowed. And some are the saddest of all, for they are messages left for no one in particular, left for whoever might come next, left in the pure faith that someone would come next. You are not alone. Others have made it. Keep going. Almond water 2 rooms east. I love you, whoever you are. These words became the country's first library, its first scripture, its first inheritance. A wanderer who could read the walls could survive, where a wanderer who could not would die. And so the reading of the walls became a skill, an art, passed from traveller to traveller, and the leaving of true and useful words became a kind of sacred duty, the one way a dying soul could reach forward through time and save a stranger's life. It is here, in the words on the walls, that we can first feel the thing that makes the backrooms bearable, the stubborn refusal of the human heart to let its suffering be meaningless, the insistence on saying, even into the void, even with the last of one's strength, I was here, and I learned this, and I give it to you. The M.E.G would one day formalize all of this, would send explorers and keep records and print proper maps. But the true beginning of all their knowledge is here, in the anonymous, drywall scripture of the first wanderers, in the graffiti of the drowned. So when you drift through the yellow halls in your dreaming, and you see a word scratched into the wall, slow down and read it kindly, for it was written by someone who wanted you to live. Beyond the yellow country lies the second of the early levels, the one they number 1, and it is a different kind of place, a vast and dim and concrete place, an endless warehouse of the world's forgotten things, where level 0 was carpet and wallpaper and the buzz of failing lights. Level 1 is bare walls and exposed pipes, tall industrial ceilings lost in shadow, great shelving units stretching away into the gloom, stacked with crates and boxes and the debris of a civilization that never quite existed. The lights here are fewer and dimmer, and the darkness pools between them in a way it never did in the yellow, so that the whole level feels like dusk, a permanent uneasy evening in a warehouse the size of a country. And yet, cruelly, this level is called habitable, and the name is earned, for it is more livable than the raw yellow horror before it. There is space here to make camp. There are things to scavenge, materials to build with, corners to fortify. The moisture is less. The air is less foul. And so it was here, in the great dim warehouse, that the wanderers first began to stop wandering, to gather, to build the first rough shelters and the first fragile communities. Level 1 became the country's first frontier town, its first place where survival could become something more than mere endurance. But the dimness is not empty. In the shadows between the shelves, things move, and the early settlers of Level 1 learned to fear the dark aisles, the places where the lights did not reach, for the entities of this place favor the gloom, and the great open darkness of the upper level is worse still, a black expanse where the hounds run and hunt. So the settlers kept to the lit corridors and lived their small brave lives in the pools of pale light, and told each other the dark aisles were not to be entered alone, or after the hum shifted, or ever, if it could be helped. It is a strange thing to build a home in a warehouse behind reality, and yet that is what they did. These early people, hammering shelter from scavenged crates, hoarding almond water, posting watches against the dark, and calling this grim and dusty place, without irony, habitable, because it was better and better in the backrooms, is all anyone can ever hope for. To live in Level 1 was to live with the darkness at your back, always, and the settlers of the great warehouse developed a whole culture around it, a discipline of light and watchfulness that would echo through every group to come. They mapped the reliable lights, the fixtures that never failed, and built their camps beneath them, and they learned the geography of the safe corridors, the lit spines of the level along which one could move without walking blind. They posted watchers always at the edges of the light, souls whose whole grim task was to stare into the dark aisles and listen for the sound of something coming, so that the rest could sleep. And sleep, in Level 1, was a fragile and guarded thing, snatched in shifts, in fortified corners, with a watcher's eyes on the dark. The entities that troubled them were mostly the lurkers of shadow, things that could not or would not enter the light, and so the light became religion, became law, became the thin bright wall between the living and the things that wanted them. But the warehouse held a subtler danger too, for it was vast, and the shelving units made a maze, and it was terribly easy to become lost among the aisles, to lose the thread of the safe corridors, to wander one shelf too far and find oneself in the dark with no lit path back. The watchers told stories of this, of the ones who went too deep to scavenge and did not return, whose almond water ran out somewhere in the black aisles, whose names were later scratched into the concrete by grieving friends. And they told stories too of the deeper dark of level 1, the great open blackness above and beyond the shelving, where something ran on 4 legs and hunted by sound. And these stories were not embellished, for the hounds were real, and the dark was real, and the discipline of the watchers was the only thing that kept the warehouse a home rather than a grave. From this culture, the reverence for light, the posting of watches, the mapping of safe paths, the horror of the deep dark, so much of what the later groups became was born. The M.E.G's explorers would carry lights into every level they charted. The great outposts would fortify their perimeters and post their sentries. And all of it traces back to here, to the warehouse watchers, staring into the dark aisles so that their friends could sleep, holding the line of light against the patient, hungry black. Deeper still lies the level they number 2, and it is perhaps the most claustrophobic of all the early places, a level of long, narrow, endless maintenance corridors, tight halls of concrete and tile lined with pipes, great runs of pipe overhead and along the walls, carrying steam, carrying heat, carrying who knows what through the veins of a building with no purpose and no end. The corridors here are cramped, and they branch, and they turn, a suffocating warren where the walls press close and the ceiling hangs low, and the only sounds are the hiss and knock of the pipes and, sometimes, from somewhere ahead or behind, the soft echo of footsteps that are not your own. This is the level the wanderers came to call the pipe dreams, half in bleak humour, for there are no dreams here worth having, only the long, tense passage through the tightening dark. The pipes leak steam in places, and the heat can be dangerous, and the narrowness means there is nowhere to run, no room to dodge, no way past a thing that fills the corridor ahead of you. And the entities of level 2 know this. They favour these halls precisely because the halls give their prey no room. The great fear of level 2 is the fear of hearing footsteps ahead, in a corridor too narrow to turn in, and not knowing whether they are coming toward you or away, and having no choice but to go on, into the sound, because there is no other path. The early explorers who charted this level did so at terrible cost, for it is a maze, and it is tight, and the almond water is harder to find, and the way back is easy to lose among the identical branching pipes. And yet, through level 2, the wanderers had to pass, for it connects to deeper places, and the M.E.G would one day need it mapped and understood. So they went into the pipe dreams, torch in hand, listening always for the footsteps, and they scratched their arrows on the pipes and their warnings on the tile, and many of them did not come out, and the corridors kept their names in the leaking steam. There is a particular horror to a tight place, a horror older than any monster, the animal horror of being trapped, of having no room to flee, and level 2 is that horror made into a country, corridor after corridor after corridor, all of them narrow, all of them branching, all of them humming with the knock of the pipes and the echo of a footstep that may or may not be your own. Let us stay a while in the pipe dreams, for the footsteps deserve their own telling. In the tight corridors of level 2, sound behaves strangely. It bounces from the pipes and the tile. It echoes and doubles. It seems to come from ahead when its source is behind, from below when its source is above. And so, a wanderer in these halls lives in a constant low terror of the acoustic, forever trying to place a sound that will not be placed, forever asking whether the soft footfall they hear is their own echo, or another lost soul, or something wearing the shape of a footfall, the way the false almond water wears the shape of mercy. The old accounts of level 2 are thick with this dread. Wanderers wrote of following footsteps for hours, certain another human was just ahead, calling out, getting no answer, and finding at last only an empty corridor, or worse. Wanderers wrote of being followed, of the footsteps that matched their own, that stopped when they stopped and moved when they moved, so that they could never be sure whether they were hearing a pursuer or the mocking echo of their own fear. And wanderers wrote of the thing they most dreaded, the footsteps that did not match, that came steady and unhurried down a corridor with no branch, so that there was nothing to do but go forward and meet whatever was making them. The discipline that grew up around level 2 was a discipline of silence and stillness. Move slowly, set each foot down soft, stop often and listen, and learn the sound of your own steps so well that you can tell them from another's in the treacherous echo. And when you hear steps that are not yours, freeze and wait, and let them pass if they will. For in the pipe dreams, the worst thing you can do is run, since running fills the corridor with noise and blinds your ears and drives you deeper into the maze. It is a level that teaches patience and dread and the fine and desperate art of listening. And it is a level that, more than any other of the early places, gets into the wanderer's sleep, for even those who pass safely through carry the footsteps with them, and hear them still in the quiet hours, the soft, unplaceable tread of something in a narrow hall, coming or going, or perhaps only the echo of themselves, forever lost in the pipes. Below the pipe dreams lies the third of the early levels, and it is a place of a different flavour of dread, a vast electrical station, a maze of concrete rooms and metal walkways strung with cables and machinery, humming not with the soft fluorescent buzz of level 0, but with the heavy, dangerous hum of power, of transformers and generators and great banks of humming electrical works. Here the danger is elemental and immediate, for the machinery is live, and a wrong step onto a wet floor near an exposed cable is death, quick and violent, and the wanderers learn to read the level for its hazards, the way one reads a minefield. But there is a worse thing about level 3 than its live current, and it is the machinery itself, or rather, what the machinery seems to serve, for the whole level gives the impression of running for some purpose, of powering something, of being the electrical heart of a building whose body no one has ever found. The lights here flicker with the fluctuations of the power, and in the flickering the shadows leap and crawl, and the entities of this place use that leaping dark, appearing and vanishing in the strobing gloom, so that a wanderer can never be sure whether the shape at the edge of the flicker is a machine, or a shadow, or something creeping closer in the gaps between the light. The corridors of level 3 are a maze like all the early levels, and the metal walkways ring underfoot, betraying every step, and the air smells of ozone and hot metal and the particular sharp tang of electricity. It is not a habitable place. No one settles in the electrical station. The wanderers pass through it, quickly if they can, and the explorers chart it at great risk, and the whole level has the feel of a threshold, a dangerous passage between the shallow levels and the deeper places beyond. And it holds a strange fascination too, for some have wondered what all this power is for, what it feeds, what waits deeper down that needs so vast an engine to sustain it. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps the machinery hums for no one. Another cruel piece of the Backrooms' meaningless scenery. Or perhaps, some of the wanderers feared, it powers the place itself, the lights and the hum, and the whole endless architecture. And to understand it would be to understand what the Backrooms truly is, a thing no living soul has ever done, and perhaps no living soul should. We have spoken much of survival, but the true weight of these early years is in the dying. for the early wanderers died in numbers we can only imagine, and their dying was the school in which all the later wisdom was learned. Every rule the groups would one day live by, every warning scratched into the drywall, every discipline of light and silence and water was paid for in a life, usually many lives, souls who did the wrong thing once, in ignorance, because no one had yet learned the right thing and left it on the wall. They died of thirst before the almond water was understood, and of the false water after. They died in the dark aisles of level 1, and the narrow branches of level 2, and the live floors of level 3. They died of the entities, taken in the silence when the hum stopped, hunted by the hounds, worn thin and hollow by the skin stealers, driven mad by the smilers in the dark. And they died, too, of the place itself, of the sameness, of the endless yellow, sitting down at last against a wall and simply refusing to rise, undone by a despair the surface world has no name for. And in the dying, something tender began, for the living learned to bury their dead, or to mark them, in a place with no earth to dig and no stone to carve. They laid them in quiet rooms and closed the doors. They scratched their names on the walls above them. They gathered what small things the dead had carried, a bottle, a torch, a scrap of writing, and passed them on, so that nothing useful was wasted and nothing loved was wholly lost. The first graves of the backrooms are simply rooms, ordinary rooms among the endless identical rooms, made sacred only by a name on the wall and the memory of those who closed the door. And this too became a tradition, a thread of dignity running through the whole grim history, the insistence that even here, even in a country that does not care whether you live or die, the dead would be honored, would be named, would be remembered by the living for as long as the living endured. The M.E.G would one day keep proper records of the fallen, would honor its lost explorers by name, and all of that solemn accounting begins here, in the first graves, in the first names scratched above the first closed doors, in the refusal of the early wanderers to let their friends vanish as if they had never been. Out of the chaos of the early wandering, slowly, painfully, came the first true maps, and they changed everything. For as long as each wanderer knew only their own path, the backrooms remained pure chaos, an unlearnable place where every soul had to discover every danger anew. But when wanderers began to meet, and to share what they knew, and to write it down not as scattered warnings but as connected knowledge, a shape began, faintly, to emerge. This corridor connects to that room. This level lies below that one. The almond water gathers in this kind of place. The hounds run in that kind of dark. The mapping of the backrooms was the great intellectual labor of the early years, and it was heroic, for every mile mapped was a mile walked in mortal danger by someone who chose to go, not to flee or to scavenge, but simply to know, to add one more room to the growing picture of the country. These early cartographers were a strange breed, brave past the point of sense, driven by something more than survival, by the need to make the unknowable knowable, to push back the chaos with knowledge one room at a time. Many of them died in the mapping, of course, walked into a level no one had charted and were never charted themselves, and their maps ended mid-line, an arrow pointing into a room that killed them. But enough survived, and enough shared, that the knowledge accumulated, that the levels acquired their numbers and their names and their known dangers, that a wanderer could at last be handed a map and told with some confidence that this way lay water and that way lay death. The maps were never complete. They are not complete now. The Backrooms is too vast, too strange, too changeable, and there are levels beyond counting and depths no map has ever reached. But the beginning of maps was the beginning of civilization here. The moment the country stopped being pure nightmare and started being, in some small and hard-won way, understood. And when the M.E.G was founded, its first and greatest treasure was not water or weapons, but knowledge. The accumulated maps and records of all the wanderers who had gone before, gathered at last into one archive, one growing memory of the whole country behind the world. Before we go further, we must speak of the people who are not people, for they walk through this whole story, and to understand the Backrooms is to understand them. The wanderers call them facelings, and the name says it all, for they are shaped like human beings, they walk like human beings, they move through the levels as we do, and yet where a face should be there is nothing, a smooth blank absence, a head with no eyes and no mouth and no expression, only a pale emptiness that the mind refuses to accept. They are not, most of them, hostile. This is the strange and unsettling truth of the facelings. They wander the levels as we wander them. They seem to go about lives of some kind, and if you do not trouble them, most will not trouble you. But to share a hallway with one is a special horror, for the human mind is built to read faces, to know friend from foe by the eyes, and the faceling offers nothing to read, only that smooth blankness, so that you can never know what it intends, never see it coming, never take any comfort from its expression, because it has none. And there is a darker rule to them, which the early wanderers learned and passed on carefully. The facelings mimic. They watch what you do, and they do it too. If you smile, some say, they will try to smile back, and the sight of a smile forming on a blank and faceless head is a thing that has broken minds. If you show fear, they grow agitated. If you show aggression, some of them turn dangerous, and a hostile faceling is a terrible thing, strong and relentless and wearing your own shape. So the wanderers learn to move among them with a flat and careful calm, to show no strong emotion, to neither smile nor scowl, to pass the faceless people as one passes a sleeping dog, softly, evenly, giving no cause for the mimicry to turn. Where the facelings come from, no one knows. Some believe they were once human, wanderers lost so long and so deep that the place wore their faces away. Some believe they are the Backroom's own people, native to it, the true citizens of a country we have merely fallen into. And some fear a worse thing, that to stay too long, to wander too deep, to lose too much of oneself in the endless sameness, is to become one, to feel one's own face slowly forgotten, until at last one joins the blank and drifting crowd. It is one of the oldest fears of the Backrooms, and one of the quietest, the fear not of being killed, but of being erased, of losing not your life but your face, and drifting on, with nothing left to say who you were. In the dark places, where the lights have failed and the shadows pool, live the smilers, and of all the entities of the Backrooms, they are perhaps the simplest and the most primally frightening, for they are nothing but a smile in the dark. That is all you see of them, and all you need to see, a wide, curved, glowing smile, and two glowing eyes, hanging in the blackness where the light does not reach, watching you. They dwell in darkness, always, and they cannot or will not enter the light, and so the whole defense against them is the oldest lesson of the country: stay in the light, and they cannot touch you. But in the dark levels, the low-lit levels, the places where the fixtures have failed, the smilers gather, and a wanderer who must cross such a place walks through a gauntlet of watching grins, floating in the black to either side, following with their eyes, drawing close if the light fails, and if the darkness ever fully takes you, they take you too. The horror of the smilers is the horror of being watched by something that finds you funny, something that grins at your fear, something for which your terror is a kind of delight. Their smile is not friendly. It is the smile of a thing that knows something you do not, the smile of a predator amused by the smallness of its prey. And in the levels where they gather, the wanderers learned a terrible arithmetic of light and dark, learned to hoard their torches and their batteries and their almond water, learned to run the lit paths and never, ever linger where the shadows thicken. The early accounts speak of the smilers with a weary dread, for they are everywhere the dark is, and the dark is much of the backrooms, and there is no fighting them, no reasoning with them, no doing anything but keeping the light between you and their endless patient grins. To be caught in the dark with the smilers closing in, the torch flickering, the batteries dying, the grins drawing near on every side, is one of the defining terrors of this whole country, and it is a terror that never fully leaves those who have known it, so that ever after they fear the dark not as children fear it, vaguely, but as those who have seen what waits there, the smile that hangs in the black, glowing, watching, endlessly, patiently amused. In the great dark expanses, in the deep, unlit places of the shallow levels and beyond, run the hounds, and they are the pure predators of the backrooms, the closest thing this country has to a simple beast of prey. They are dog-like or wolf-like, but wrong, gaunt and pale and hungry, with too many teeth and eyes that catch what little light there is, and they hunt in packs, and they hunt by sound. This is the crucial and terrible fact of the hounds, the fact around which the whole defense against them is built. They are all but blind, and they navigate the dark by hearing, and so the wanderer who would survive them must master a discipline harder than any other in the backrooms, the discipline of perfect silence. To cross a hound-haunted dark is to move without a sound, to set each foot down soft, to still one's very breath, to make no noise at all, for the smallest sound, a footfall, a cough, a bottle knocked against a wall, brings the pack, and when the pack comes, there is little hope, for they are fast, and they are many, and they run down their prey in the dark by the sound of its panic. The early settlers of level 1 knew the hounds well, for the deep dark of the warehouse was their range, and the whole culture of the warehouse watchers, the reverence for light, the horror of the dark aisles, was in large part a culture of hiding from the hounds. But the hounds are not confined to any one level. They run in the dark wherever the dark is deep enough, and many a wanderer, crossing what they thought was an empty blackness, learned too late that they were not alone, that the pack had heard them, that the soft sound of running was closing from behind. It is a clean and ancient terror, the hounds, the terror of being hunted, of being prey, of the thing in the dark that runs faster than you and hears you no matter how quiet you try to be. And it taught the wanderers a hard humility, that in this place they were not the top of any order, that they were meat, that the dark was full of hungry things for which they were simply food. The silence discipline of the Houndlands runs deep in the whole survival culture of the backrooms, the habit of quiet, the fear of noise, the understanding that in the dark, sound is death, and the only safety is to move like a ghost, making no more mark upon the air than a memory. Of all the horrors of the backrooms, none troubles the human heart quite like the skin stealers, for they strike at the deepest and most necessary of all our trusts, the trust that the face of a friend is the face of a friend. The skin stealers are entities that wear us, that take the appearance of human beings, that walk among the wanderers looking exactly like one of them, and only small wrongnesses give them away, if anything does. The skin sits a little loose, The smile is a little too wide, held a little too long. The eyes are a little empty. The joints move a little strangely. And sometimes, in an unguarded moment, the thing forgets to be human, and something shows through the borrowed skin, something hungry and old. They are said to take the shapes of the dead, of the lost, of the ones we most long to see again. And this is the cruelest of their weapons, for the wanderer who has walked alone for weeks and suddenly sees, down the endless hall, the face of a friend they thought was gone, wants so badly to believe, and the wanting is the trap. The skin stealers exploit our loneliness, our grief, our desperate need for another human soul in the dark, and so they poison the one comfort the wanderers had, the comfort of meeting one another. For after the skin stealers, no meeting could be wholly trusted, no friendly face taken purely at its word. The culture that grew up around them was a culture of small tests and careful watching, of learning the tells, the loose skin, the too wide smile, the eyes that do not quite track, of asking the questions only the true friend could answer, of watching a stranger long and coldly before letting them close. It made the wanderers harder, warier, lonelier, for the skin stealers taught them to doubt the very thing they most needed, and there is a special grief in that, in having to look at the face of a possible friend and search it for signs that it is a monster wearing a face. The groups would one day build whole protocols around this, ways of proving oneself human, passwords and challenges, and long, careful vetting at the gates of the outposts. But the wound the skin stealers left is deeper than any protocol can close. The wound of learned distrust, the knowledge that in this country the shape of a loved one may be the deadliest thing of all, and that sometimes the kindest looking face in the endless hall is the one that means to wear your own skin next. Not all the dangers of the backrooms wear a face or run on legs, for some are stranger and quieter, woven into the very fabric of the levels, and among these is the thing the wanderers call the bacteria. It is a hazard of certain deep and forgotten places, a creeping growth, a kind of living mold or slime that spreads across the surfaces of the levels where the moisture pools and the neglect runs deep. In some tellings, it is barely alive at all, a hazard like the leaking pipes or the live floors, a thing to be avoided rather than fought. But in others it is worse, a growth that hungers, that spreads toward warmth, that can catch and hold and slowly consume the wanderer who blunders into it. And there are dark accounts of chambers webbed and flawed with the stuff, of the bones of the lost caught in it like flies in a web, of the whole air of such places thick and wet and wrong. The bacteria teaches a different kind of caution than the beast do, the caution of the surface underfoot, of the wall you lean against, of the ground you would sit down upon to rest. For in the deeper and older levels, the wanderers learned not every surface is safe to touch, and the innocent-looking damp of a wall may be alive, may be spreading, may be waiting for the warmth of a hand. And there is a slow horror to it, the horror of contagion, of something that gets on you and in you and cannot be washed away, that turns your own body against you, that makes the very act of touching the world a danger. The wanderers who travelled the bacteria-haunted levels went carefully, touching nothing they did not have to, resting nowhere they had not first inspected, treating the whole environment as a thing that might, at any moment, reach out and hold them fast. It is one of the subtler terrors of the country, the bacteria, easy to overlook beside the smilers and the hounds and the skin stealers, and yet in its way as frightening as any of them, for it reminds the wanderer that in the back rooms even the ground, even the walls, even the still and silent surfaces may be quietly, patiently alive, and quietly, patiently hungry, and waiting only for the touch of a warm and living hand. And there are gentler horrors too, if such a thing can be. Entities that mean no harm and yet unsettle the soul by their very strangeness. And among these are the death moths. They are, at first, almost a comfort, for they are moths, large pale moths that gather in certain levels, drawn to the light, fluttering soft and slow through the yellow halls, and after the hounds and the smilers and the skin stealers, a wanderer might almost be glad to see them, a living thing that does not want to kill. And indeed the death moths are for the most part harmless, even helpful, for they are drawn to almond water, and where they gather, water is often near, and the wanderers learn to read them as a kind of sign, to follow the moss to the drink. But there is a wrongness to them still, in their number, in their size, in the soft dry brush of their wings against the face in a dark hall, and above all in their name, for the wanderers did not call them death moths for nothing. They gather, some say, where death is near, drawn not only to water, but to the failing and the dying, and there are wanderers who tell of the moths thickening around them as their almond water ran low and their strength failed, of the pale wings gathering close as if in patient attendance, as if they knew. Whether this is true, or whether it is only the frightened fancy of the dying, no one can say. But the death moths took on, in the law of the country, the character of psychopomps, of soft pale escorts to the end, harmless in themselves and yet freighted with the weight of what they were thought to foretell. To wake in a dim level and find the moths gathered thick around you, brushing your face with their dusty wings, is to feel a cold hand on the heart, to wonder whether they have come for the water you carry, or for something else, something in you that is beginning, quietly, to fail. And so even the gentle things of the backrooms carry dread, even the harmless moths, for in this country nothing is only what it seems, and the softest wings in the dark may be the wings that gather at the end, patient and pale, to see the last of the light go out. For a long age the backrooms had no order but the fragile order of the small bands, no memory but the scattered words on the walls, no defence but each wanderer's own wit and luck. And then, out of the accumulating knowledge and the accumulating grief, came the great turning of the whole history, the founding of the M.E.G, the major explorer group, the first true civilization of the country behind the world. It did not begin as a grand thing. It began, we may imagine, as a few bands who found each other and did not part, who pooled their maps and their water and their watches, who realized that what one band knew could save another band, that if the knowledge could only be gathered and kept and shared, the whole country might be made a little less deadly for everyone. From that seed grew something unprecedented, an organization spanning levels, a network of wanderers bound not by blood or accident, but by a shared and deliberate purpose, to explore, to document, to survive, and above all, to help those who came after. The M.E.G gathered the maps, all the scattered cartography of the early years, into a single growing archive. It kept records, true records, of the levels and their dangers and their resources, of the entities and their ways, of the deaths and the lessons the deaths had brought. It sent out explorers, deliberate and equipped, not to flee or to scavenge, but to know, to push the maps outward one charted room at a time. And it built the outposts, the fortified havens scattered through the safer levels, where a lost wanderer could find water and shelter and the company of other human souls, where the endless solitude of the early years could at last be broken. The founding of the M.E.G is the moment the backrooms acquired a future, a memory, a they that could be spoken of, a civilization however small and beleaguered. It is not a happy story, even so, for the M.E.G is beset on every side, stretched thin across an infinite and hostile country, forever losing outposts and explorers and hard-won ground. But it is the great light of the whole history, the proof that even here, even in the worst place in creation, human beings will band together, will build, will remember, will reach out across the dark to say to the lost, "We are here, come to us. You do not have to face this alone." The first outpost of the M.E.G was a small and desperate thing, and yet it changed the meaning of the whole country, for it was the first place in the Backrooms that was safe, or as safe as anywhere here ever is. The first place a wanderer could come to and be received, and rest and drink and sleep without a watcher's fear. Where it stood, the oldest accounts do not always agree, but it was somewhere in the shallow and habitable levels, a fortified corner of the endless architecture, walled and lit and watched, stocked with hoarded almond water and defended by those who had chosen to stay and hold ground, rather than wander on. Imagine the coming to it, for a wanderer of the early years. You have walked alone, or nearly alone, through the yellow and the dark, for longer than you can measure. You have drunk the almond water and buried friends and read the words on the walls. You have believed, in your worst hours, that there was nothing in all this country but emptiness and hunger and the slow forgetting of your own face. And then, down some ordinary hall, you see a light that is warmer than the buzzing fluorescence, and you hear voices, human voices, and you come to a wall that has been built by human hands, and a door, and at the door a watcher who looks at you long and carefully, testing whether you are human, whether you are what you seem, and then, satisfied, lets you in. And inside there are people, living people with faces who speak to you, who give you water, who tell you their names and ask for yours, who have made, in the heart of the nightmare, a small and stubborn place of warmth. The first outpost was more than shelter. It was proof that the country could be resisted, that the emptiness could be pushed back, that human beings could carve out a home even here. And from it the whole network grew, outpost by outpost, each one a light in the dark, each one a place where the lost could be found and the wandering could rest. The M.E.G's outposts became the country's true settlements, its towns, its hearths, and the tending of them, the holding of the walls, the posting of the watches, the sharing of the water, became the great communal labour of the whole civilization, the daily work of keeping a little warmth alive in the endless cold. From the first small haven, the outpost spread, slowly and at great cost, across the safer levels of the shallow back rooms, until they formed a scattered archipelago of light in the vast dark sea of the country. Each new outpost was an act of enormous labour and courage, for to found one was to choose a place, and hold it, and wall it, and stock it, and defend it, against the entities and the emptiness and the ever-present threat of the levels themselves shifting or turning hostile. The outposts were placed with care, in levels that offered water or safety or some strategic value, at the crossings between levels, at the sources of almond water, at the edges of the known and the unknown, where explorers set out and returned, and they were connected, as best the treacherous geography allowed, by known and travelled routes, so that a wanderer or a message or a load of water could pass from one to another, so that the whole network could function as something more than scattered points, as a true civilization spread across the levels. Life in the outpost developed its own textures, its own customs and cultures, for people who live together anywhere will make a way of living, even here. There were roles and rules, and the daily rhythms of survival, the fetching of water, the standing of watches, the keeping of the records, the tending of the sick and the burying of the dead. There were leaders and disputes, and the slow working out of how human beings ought to treat one another in a place with no law, but the law they made themselves. And there was, above all, the constant labour of defence, for the outposts were islands, and the sea around them was hungry, and the entities probed forever at the walls, and no outpost was ever truly safe, and some, over the years, were lost, overrun or abandoned or swallowed when their level turned against them, their people scattered again into the wandering dark. The spread of the outposts is the spread of hope across the country, but it is a hope forever under siege, forever partial, forever paid for in vigilance and blood, and yet it held. Outpost by outpost, the light spread, and the network endured, battered and diminished and rebuilt, the stubborn civilization of the lost refusing, level by level, room by room, to let the emptiness have the whole of the country behind the world. At the heart of the M.E.G, more precious than its water or its walls, was its memory, and the keeping of that memory became one of the great sacred labours of the whole civilization. For the M.E.G understood, as the early wanderers had understood in their scratchings on the walls, that in this country knowledge is life, that every level charted and every entity understood and every death accounted for is a gift to all who come after, a light against the chaos. And so they kept records, true and careful records, gathered into archives at the great outposts, tended by keepers whose whole purpose was to preserve and organize and pass on the accumulating knowledge of the country. The records held the maps, of course, the growing cartography of the levels, forever incomplete and forever being extended by the returning explorers. They held the entity accounts, the hard-won knowledge of the smilers and the hounds and the skin stealers, and all the rest, their ways and their weaknesses and the disciplines that kept them at bay. They held the level guides, the practical wisdom of where water gathered and where death waited, and how to pass from one place to another and live. And they held the roles of the lost, the names of the explorers and wanderers who had died in the service of the knowledge, honoured and remembered so that their sacrifice would not be forgotten. The keepers of the records were a quiet and vital order, less celebrated than the explorers who braved the levels, and yet their work was the true foundation of the whole civilization. For an explorer's knowledge dies with the explorer, unless it is written down and kept, and a country that forgets its own hard lessons must learn them again in blood. There is something deeply moving in this, in the image of the keepers at their archives in the lit outposts, tending the memory of a country that the country itself is forever trying to erase, holding the accumulated wisdom of the lost against the endless forgetting of the yellow halls. It is the oldest human labour of all, the labour of memory, of saying what was learned so that it need not be learned again. And in the backrooms, where the very carpet forgets every footstep, it is more precious and more heroic than anywhere in the solid world. The M.E.G was the greatest of the groups, but it was never the only one, for wherever human beings gather, they divide, and the country behind the world grew its own factions, its own rivals, its own darker societies. Among the first and most notable was the group the wanderers came to know by its letters, the B.N.T.G, a rival organization, another band of the lost who had chosen to organize, to explore, to hold ground, but who were not of the M.E.G and did not always share its ways. The existence of the B.N.T.G is a reminder that the Backrooms is not a simple story of the good survivors against the hungry dark, but a human story, with all the complexity that word implies, of cooperation and rivalry, of shared purpose and divided loyalty, of groups that might trade with one another one season and clash the next. The BNTG explored, as the M.E.G explored, and charted, and held outposts of its own, and in this the two groups might have been allies, two lights against the same dark. But they were rivals too, competing for the same scarce resources, the water, the safe levels, the strategic crossings, and rivalry in a place of such scarcity can turn hard and cold. There are accounts of tension between them, of disputed territory, of the wary and sometimes hostile dealings of two organizations that needed the same things and did not trust each other to share. And there is a deeper melancholy in this, for one might wish, hearing the whole story, that all the lost would simply band together, that in the face of a common and terrible enemy, the emptiness itself, the survivors would set aside their divisions and stand as one. But they did not, could not, for they were human, and human beings carry their divisions with them wherever they go, even into the country behind the world, even into the last and worst place of all. The BNTG stands for all the other groups, the many bands and factions that dot the history of the Backrooms, each with its own purpose, its own territory, its own uneasy place in the fragile politics of the lost. And the tale of the country is, in part, the tale of how these groups lived alongside one another, sometimes in cooperation, sometimes in conflict, forever negotiating the hard question of how the survivors of a shared catastrophe ought to treat one another when there is not enough water and not enough safety and not enough of anything to go around. Darker than the BNTG and more feared was the group the Wanderers called the Lost Legion, and where the M.E.G and its rivals were, for all their faults, organizations of survival and knowledge, the Lost Legion was something harder and more warlike, a group forged not around exploration, but around power, around force, around the will to take and to hold by strength. They were, in the telling of it, a militant faction, disciplined and armed and organized for war, and their creed was not the gentle creed of the words on the walls, the "you are not alone" of the early wanderers, but a creed of strength and dominance, of survival through power, rather than through knowledge and cooperation. To some, they were villains, raiders and warlords of the levels, taking by force what others had gathered, holding their territory with a hard hand, feared by the smaller bands who could not stand against them. And to others, perhaps to themselves, they were realists, the ones who understood that in a country this cruel softness is death, that the water goes to the strong, that the only safety is power and the will to use it. The Lost Legion stands in the history as a dark mirror to the M.E.G, the same catastrophe answered in a different key, the same lost humanity turned not toward memory and mercy, but toward force and fear, and there is a terrible plausibility to them. For one can understand how the Backrooms might forge such a group, how the endless scarcity and the endless danger might convince a band of the lost that the only law is strength, that the gentle old creed of the walls is a luxury the strong need not afford. Their conflicts with the other groups, with the M.E.G and the rest, form some of the hardest chapters of the whole history, the wars of the levels, fought room by room in the endless halls, over water, over territory, over the simple question of who would rule what little there was to rule. It is a bleak thread in the story, the Lost Legion, a reminder that the darkness of the Backrooms is not only in its entities and its emptiness, but in the human heart itself, which can turn, under enough pressure, in enough darkness, toward the oldest and cruelest answer of all, that might makes right, and the strong shall take what they will. And then there are the party-goers, and to speak of them is to enter one of the strangest and most disturbing corners of the whole country, for they are neither straightforward survivors nor straightforward monsters, but something in between, something that was human once and has become, through the workings of a certain terrible level, something else. The party-goers are the people of level fun, the inhabitants of that gaudy and deadly place, and they are, in appearance, human, or nearly so, dressed for a party, laughing, dancing, celebrating endlessly in a bright and manic revel that never stops and never means well. For the joy of the party-goers is not joy at all, or not the joy of the living. It is a hollow, hungry, predatory thing, the celebration of a place that consumes, and the party-goers welcome the wandering stranger into their party with open arms and wide smiles, and the stranger who joins them, who is drawn in by the light and the laughter after so long in the dark, does not leave, or leaves changed, becomes one of them, another laughing figure in the endless deadly revel. They were people once, most of them, wanderers who came to level fun, and were taken by it, unmade and remade in its bright and terrible image, their humanity worn away and replaced with the hollow gaiety of the place. And this is their particular horror, that they are a warning of what the backrooms can do to a soul. Not only kill it, but pervert it, turn its very joy and hunger for company into a weapon, make of a lost human being a smiling lure for the next lost human being to come. The party-goers exploit the deepest longing of the wanderer, the longing for warmth, for company, for celebration, for an end to the endless grim solitude of the yellow halls, and they offer it brightly, gladly, falsely, and the wanderer who accepts is lost. We will come to their level in its proper place, to level fun and its dreadful gaiety, but the party-goers themselves belong here, among the groups and societies of the country, for they are, in their way, a society, a community, a people, bound together in their bright hollow revel, and forever seeking, with open arms and endless smiles, to make their community larger by one more lost and lonely soul. Beyond the human groups, beyond the M.E.G and its rivals and the darker factions, there are stranger communities still in the backrooms, and among the strangest are the societies of the facelings, for the faceless people, it turns out, are not always solitary wanderers, but gather, in certain levels, into something like communities of their own. The wanderers who have observed these gatherings speak of them with a deep unease, for they are, in their outward form, so terribly like human society. The facelings gather and move together, and seem to have their own patterns, their own comings and goings, their own silent purposes, and to come upon such a gathering, a crowd of faceless figures going about some blank and purposeless routine, is to feel the ground of one's understanding shift, to wonder whether one has stumbled upon the true natives of the country, the real citizens of a place we merely blunder through. For if the facelings have societies, then perhaps the backrooms is not empty at all, not a vast abandoned architecture through which a few lost humans wander, but an inhabited country, a place with its own people and its own life, and we, the intruders, the lost, the strangers who fell in from somewhere else and understand nothing. Some of the faceling societies are said to mimic human life quite closely, to gather in the semblance of towns, to move through the semblance of daily routines, as if performing, blankly and endlessly, the memory of a human life none of them possesses. And this is perhaps the saddest reading of the facelings, that they are echoes, remnants, the worn-away ghosts of wanderers who lost themselves so completely, that only the shape of humanity remains, gathering still in the shape of communities, performing still the motions of a life whose meaning is long forgotten. Whether this is true, whether the faceling societies are native or fallen, whether they are the country's people or its victims, no wanderer can say for certain. But their existence deepens the whole mystery of the place, for it suggests that the Backrooms is not simply a trap or a wasteland, but a world with its own inhabitants, its own order, its own quiet and unknowable life going on in the endless halls, indifferent to the few warm intruders who fall in and wander and die. A world that was here before us and will be here after, blank-faced and patient, and utterly its own. Now we come to one of the strangest mercies of the whole country, to a place that stands apart from all the dread that surrounds it, to the pool rooms, and to speak of them is to feel, for a moment, the tension of the story ease. For the pool rooms are beautiful. After the yellow horror and the dark aisles and the narrow pipes, after the smilers and the hounds and the skin stealers, the wanderer who clips into the pool rooms feels something almost forgotten, a kind of peace. It is a level of water, endless interconnected pools and chambers of pale tile, filled with clear, warm, still water, lit by a soft blue light that seems to come from the water itself, so that the whole place glows with a gentle aquatic radiance, and the only sound is the soft lap and echo of the water against the tile. There is a serenity here that exists nowhere else in the Backrooms, a beauty so unexpected that many wanderers coming upon it have simply stopped and wept, and sat at the edge of the glowing water, and let themselves believe for a while that they had found something good. And perhaps they had, for the pool rooms are, by most accounts, largely safe, a rare haven of calm in the endless dread, a place to rest, to drink, to bathe, to remember for a moment what beauty was. But even here, in this one gentle place, the Backrooms keeps its edge of unease, for the water goes on forever, chamber into chamber into chamber, all identical, all glowing, all still, and there is something in that endlessness, that perfect serene sameness, that begins after a while to press on the mind as surely as the yellow halls do. And the water is deep, in places deeper than it looks, and there are passages that lead down into submerged chambers, into flooded corridors that go on beneath the surface, and the wanderers speak of these deep places with a returning dread. For who knows what lies at the bottom of an endless pool, in the drowned levels beneath the beautiful glowing water. Still, of all the levels, the pool rooms are the one the wanderers remember with something like love, the one bright and beautiful mercy in the whole grim country. And there is a lesson in that too, a hard and tender lesson, that even in the worst of all places, beauty can be found, unlooked for, undeserved, glowing softly in the dark, and that the human heart, no matter how battered, will always stop and marvel and be grateful at the sight of still water lit with blue. Let us linger at the water's edge, for the pool rooms have a mood all their own, and it is worth dwelling in. The silence here is not the terrible silence of level 0, the trap silence that means something is coming. It is a fuller, gentler quiet, filled with the soft sounds of water, the lap against the tile, the drip from some unseen height, the echo of one's own movements magnified and softened by the vast wet chambers. It is a silence that soothes rather than threatens, and wanderers have written of falling in the pool rooms into the first true rest they had known since their falling, of sleeping at the water's edge without a watcher's fear, of feeling, for the first time in the country, something like safety. And yet the very peace of the place carries its own subtle danger, For the back rooms rarely gives without taking, and the pool rooms take slowly, take gently, take through their very serenity. For the wanderer who finds this beautiful place and rests and is soothed, may find it hard to leave, may linger a day, and then another, and then lose count, lulled by the warm water and the soft blue light and the gentle endless quiet, until the almond water runs low and the will to go grows weak, and the beautiful haven becomes a beautiful trap, a place too pleasant to leave and too endless to survive in. There are stories of wanderers who stayed too long in the pool rooms, who let the peace take them, who were found or never found at the edge of the glowing water, having simply stopped, having chosen the beautiful stillness over the hard road onward. And there is a strange gentleness even to this, a kind of mercy in the way the pool rooms kill, if kill is even the word, not with tooth or terror, but with peace, with rest, with the offer of an end to the long, hard wandering. It is the softest danger in all the country, and perhaps for that reason one of the most insidious, for the wanderer knows to run from the smilers and to hide from the hounds, but who knows to flee from peace, from beauty, from the first rest in a lifetime of dread. The pool rooms teach a subtle lesson, that not every trap has teeth, that some snares are made of beauty and rest, and the deep, exhausted longing to simply stop, and that even the loveliest place in the back rooms is still the back rooms, still endless, still a country one must, in the end, find the strength to leave. And now we must go to the worst place of all, to the level that stands in the law of the whole country, as the very heart of its horror, and we must go carefully, for level fun is a place that hides its nature behind a mask of joy. It announces itself in bright colours, in balloons and streamers, in the gaudy trappings of a child's party, in a name written, the wanderers say, with a smiling face beside it, a place of fun, a place of celebration, endless and manic and bright. And it is a trap, the deadliest and cruelest trap in all the back rooms, for its whole horror is built on the perversion of joy, on turning the very things that mean safety and warmth and childhood happiness into instruments of death. The colours are too bright. The gaiety is too relentless. The party never ends, and it was never meant for the living. Here dwell the partygoers, the hollow laughing people we have already met, welcoming every newcomer into the endless revel with open arms and wide smiles. And here the wanderer who is drawn in by the colour and the laughter, after so long in the dread and the dark, finds too late that the party consumes its guests. The level is a maze of party rooms and playrooms and celebration halls, all of them bright, all of them wrong, and it hunts the wanderer not with darkness but with light, not with silence but with laughter, so that all the old disciplines fail. For how does one hide in a place that is never dark? How does one stay silent in a place that is always loud? How does one resist a place that offers brightly and gladly the very warmth and company one has been starving for? Level fun is the anti-pool rooms, the false mercy to the pool room's true one, the place that looks like joy and is death, as the pool rooms are the place that looks like nothing and is peace. And it is, in the whole grim taxonomy of the country, the level the wanderers fear above all others, the one whose name is spoken with real dread, the one that does not merely kill but unmakes, that takes a lost and lonely soul and turns it into another smiling lure, another partygoer in the endless deadly celebration, laughing, dancing forever, in the brightest and most terrible room in all the world, behind the world. Let us understand more fully what happens in level fun, for it is the darkest working of the whole country, and it deserves our slow and careful attention. The partygoers, we have said, were people once, wanderers who came here and were taken. And the taking is the true horror of the level, worse even than a simple death. For the level does not merely kill the wanderer who enters and stays, it converts them. It works on them through the endless light and the endless laughter and the endless false warmth, wearing away their fear, wearing away their sense, wearing away at last their very humanity, until the lost soul, exhausted and starving and desperate for the joy the party seems to offer, gives in, joins the revel, and becomes one of the smiling hollow people, another guest at the party that never ends. And then, most terrible of all, they become part of the trap themselves, another welcoming face, another open pair of arms, another laughing figure drawing the next wanderer in. So the level sustains itself, generation of the lost after generation, each new victim becoming the lure for the next, the party growing forever, fed forever on the loneliness and the longing of the wandering souls who stumble into its bright rooms. There is a philosophy of horror in level fun that the wanderers have long pondered, for it suggests something about the backrooms itself, that the place does not merely wish to kill us, but to use us, to turn our own best longings against us, to make of our need for warmth and company and joy the very hook on which we are caught. The pool rooms lull with peace. Level fun lures with joy. The false almond water tempts with the shape of mercy. The skin stealers exploit our love. Again and again the country attacks not our weaknesses, but our humanity itself, our deepest and most tender needs, and turns them into the instruments of our undoing. And level fun is the purest and most dreadful expression of this cruelty, the place where a wanderer's longing for happiness becomes the thing that ends them, where the last thing a lost soul feels before the light and the laughter take them is joy, false and bright and fatal, the terrible joy of the party that never, ever ends. If level fun is the horror of joy turned deadly, then the level the wanderers call by the exclamation mark is the horror of pure terror, of flight, of the chase, and its very name is a command, run. For that is all one can do there, and all one had better do from the moment one arrives. It is a level built around a single overwhelming danger, a thing that hunts, a presence that fills the level and pursues the wanderer relentlessly through it, so that from the instant of arrival, the only law is motion, the only survival is speed, and to stop, to slow, to rest, to hesitate, is to die. Where the other levels allow at least some strategy, some hiding, some careful passage, level run allows only running, headlong, gasping, through corridors that all demand the same thing, faster, faster, do not stop, do not look back, do not slow for anything, run. It is exhausting even to speak of, a level that offers no rest and no reprieve, that turns the whole of survival into a single desperate sprint, that hunts the wanderer with something they cannot fight and cannot hide from, and can only, if they are very fast and very lucky, outrun long enough to find the way out. The wanderers speak of it with a particular breathless dread, for it is the nightmare of being chased made into a whole country, the dream in which one runs and runs from a thing one cannot see and cannot escape, except that here the dream is real, and the exhaustion is real, and the thing behind is real, and there is no waking, only running, until one finds the exit or falls. There is a terrible purity to level run, a stripping away of everything but the most basic terror of all, the terror of the prey with the predator at its back, and it stands in the law of the country as a kind of ultimate test, a level that cannot be reasoned with or endured or waited out, but only survived by the body's own desperate speed, a place where all the accumulated wisdom of the wanderers comes down to a single ancient imperative, older than maps, older than words, older than the backrooms itself, the imperative that has driven living things to run from death since the very first hunt in the very first dark. Run, do not stop, run. Amid all the terror and the flight and the endless hostile levels, there stands one place that is different from all the rest. One level that is not a trap or a horror or a hunting ground, but a crossroads, a gathering place, a strange and vital heart to the whole scattered country, and the wanderers call it the hub. It is, in essence, a great transit level, a place where many levels connect, where the treacherous geography of the backrooms, for once, works in the wanderer's favour, offering many paths, many doors, many ways onward, all gathered in one place. And because it is a crossroads, it became a meeting place. And because it became a meeting place, it became something more, a centre of what passes for society in the country, a place where wanderers gather, where groups maintain a presence, where trade happens, where news and knowledge pass from level to level, along with the travellers who carry them. The hub is, in its way, the closest thing the backrooms has to a city, a place of relative safety and constant traffic, where the lost of many levels cross paths, where the isolation that defines so much of the country is, for a while, broken. Here a wanderer might find, in one place, the water they need, the map they lack, the news of a friend thought lost, the company of others who have walked the same terrible halls. Here the groups conduct their business, the M.E.G and its rivals, and the traders and the free wanderers, all passing through, all using the great crossroads for their own ends. And here, in the traffic and the trade and the gathering, one can feel most strongly the strange truth that the backrooms, for all its horror, is inhabited, is used, is in some grim sense alive with human purpose, that a civilization, however battered and scattered, truly does persist in the country behind the world. The hub is not without its dangers, for nowhere here is, and its very traffic brings risks, the skin stealer in the crowd, the thief, the raider, the entity drawn to the concentration of prey, but it stands, in the whole geography of dread, as a place of connection rather than isolation, of meeting rather than solitude, and for that alone it is precious, a great crossroads of the lost, where the many paths of the country come together, and the wandering souls for a little while are not alone. Where wanderers gather, trade follows, and in the hub and the great outposts there grew, over the years, the markets of the lost, the strange economies of a country where money means nothing and survival means everything. For the wanderers brought with them, from the solid world, all the habits of trade, the deep human instinct to exchange, to barter, to give this for that, and they turned these habits to the hard currencies of the backrooms, to water and light and knowledge and safety. Almond water was the great coin of the country, of course, the one universal value, precious beyond anything, and around it the whole economy turned, a gallon of it worth more than gold, hoarded and traded and fought over, the true wealth of the lost. But there were other currencies too, other goods that held their value in the dark. Batteries and torches, for light is life against the smilers in the dark. Food, where any could be found or made, for the almond water sustains but does not always fill. Maps and knowledge, the hard-won cartography of the levels, worth a life to the wanderer who lacks it. Weapons and tools and materials for building, and information, always information, news of the levels, of the entities, of the movements of the groups, of where water might be found and where death waited. The markets of the lost were places of intense and careful negotiation, For in a country of such scarcity, every trade mattered. Every exchange might mean the difference between living and dying, and the wanderers learned to bargain hard, to value shrewdly, to know the worth of a bottle of water or a working torch or a true map down to the last measure. And yet, there was in these markets something more than mere hard survival, for trade is also connection, is also trust, is also the slow building of relationships, of reputations, of the web of mutual dependence that binds a society together. To trade with someone, fairly, more than once, is to begin to know them, to rely on them, to build with them the fragile bonds that make a scattered people into something like a community. And so, the markets of the lost were not only economies, but societies, not only exchanges of goods, but weavings of the human fabric, and in their haggling and their bargaining and their careful dealing, the wanderers built, trade by trade, some of the strongest threads of the whole civilization, the ties of mutual need and mutual trust that held the lost together against the endless indifferent dark. Deeper into the country, past the shallow and the known, lie the stranger levels, the ones the wanderers reach less often and understand less well, and among these is the level they number 94, a place that stands apart in the lore for its peculiar and unsettling character. For not all the deeper levels are simple horrors of dark and hunger. Some are stranger than that, dreamlike, uncanny, wrong in ways that are hard to name. And level 94 is such a place, a level whose particular quality is a kind of oppressive, watchful strangeness, a sense of being somewhere that operates by rules the human mind cannot quite grasp. The wanderers who have been there and returned speak of it with a puzzled dread, describing a place that seems ordinary at first and grows stranger the longer one stays, a place where the ordinary rules of survival do not entirely apply, where the dangers are subtle and psychological as much as physical, where the very logic of the level works against the mind. It is the kind of level that reminds the wanderer that the Backrooms is not merely a hostile building, but a fundamentally alien place, a place that need not obey the laws of the world we came from, that can be strange in ways that have no name and no defense. The deeper one goes into the country, the more such levels one finds, levels of pure uncanniness, levels that assault not the body, but the sense of reality itself, levels that make the wanderer doubt their own perceptions, their own memory, their own mind. And this is, in its way, the deepest horror the Backrooms holds, deeper than any beast, the horror of a place that does not make sense, that cannot be made sense of, that undermines the very tools of understanding by which we survive. Level 94 stands for all these deeper strange places, the levels where the map runs thin and the rules grow uncertain, and the wanderer walks in a permanent low dread of a reality that will not hold still. And it marks a turning in our journey, for we have passed now beyond the shallow and the known, beyond the yellow country and the warehouse and the pipes, into the deep and the strange, where the levels grow stranger and stranger the further down we drift, and the question that has haunted the whole history begins, at last, to press upon us, the question of how deep it goes, and whether there is any bottom, and whether there is any way, from the deep places, ever to return. Among the more storied of the levels is one the wanderers came to know as a great hotel, a vast and decaying establishment of endless rooms and corridors and grand ruined halls, and it is a place of a particular flavour of dread, the dread of faded grandeur, of a luxury long abandoned, of a hotel where no guest has checked in for 100 years, and yet the lights still burn and the halls still wait. It is, in the manner of the Backrooms, endless, corridor upon corridor of numbered doors, grand staircases that climb to more of the same, ballrooms and lobbies and dining halls all empty, all echoing, all touched with the melancholy of a place built for gathering and left to silence. And it is dangerous, for the hotel is haunted, in its way, by the entities that favor such places, and the endless rooms hide endless threats, and the very grandeur of it, the sense of a place that once held life and laughter, makes its emptiness all the more oppressive. There is a particular sorrow to the great hotel, for it speaks so clearly of absence, of the ghost of human life, of rooms made for rest and company now given over to dust and dread. The wanderer who walks its halls feels the weight of all the guests who never were, the parties that never happened, the lives that the place seems to remember and mourn, and yet it offers too, the shelter that a hotel offers, rooms to hide in, doors to close, beds to rest upon, a grim parody of the comfort the place was built to give, so that the wanderer might, with care, find in the Terror Hotel a kind of dark hospitality, a place to shelter for a while amid the endless dread. It is one of the levels that most captures the essential mood of the Backrooms, the mood of human spaces emptied of humanity, of architecture built for us and abandoned by us, of the world we knew turned hollow and endless and wrong. The great hotel waits forever for guests who will not come, its lights burning, its halls echoing, its numberless doors closed on numberless empty rooms, a monument to absence, a palace of the lost, grand and ruined and endlessly, achingly empty. If the great hotel is the horror of faded grandeur, then there is a level that is the horror of pure darkness, a place the wanderers dread above almost all others, a level of total and absolute black, where no light burns and no light can be made to last, where the wanderer walks blind through an unknown dark filled with unknown things. This is the level of Lights Out, and it is the Smiler's kingdom, the hound's hunting ground, the domain of everything that loves the dark, gathered in a place that is nothing but dark, endless and total and complete. To enter it is to lose the one great defense the wanderers rely on, the light. For here there is none, and what light one brings, a torch, a lantern, seems to be swallowed, dimmed, resisted by the dark itself, so that even a good torch throws only a feeble and failing circle, and beyond it the black presses close, and in the black things move. The discipline of the Lights Out level is a discipline of pure terror controlled, of moving through absolute darkness while every instinct screams, of trusting one's feet and one's hands and one's ears where one's eyes are useless, of enduring the near certain knowledge that things are near, are watching, are perhaps reaching out just beyond the failing edge of the light. It is the childhood fear of the dark made total and made real, the fear that there is something in the black, except that here the something is real, is many, is hungry, and the dark is not the safe dark of a bedroom, but the endless dark of a level built to be a tomb. The wanderers who crossed the Lights Out level and lived did so by nerve and luck and iron discipline, by refusing to panic, by moving slow and quiet through the swallowing black, by keeping their one feeble light close and their terror closer, and by praying with every blind step to reach the far side before the dark and the things in it closed over them for good. It is a level that strips the wanderer down to the most ancient fear of all, the fear of the dark, and asks them to walk into it on purpose and cross it and come out the other side. And there are few passages in all the country that demand more courage or reward it more grudgingly than the long blind walk through the level where the lights are out forever. Deeper and stranger still, there is a level that wears the face of home, and it is, for that very reason, among the most quietly devastating of all the places in the country. It is a level of suburbs, of houses, of tree-lined streets under a perpetual night sky, an endless residential neighborhood, block after block of ordinary homes, with their porches and their lawns and their darkened windows, stretching on forever beneath a sky that is not quite right, a false and permanent night, with a moon or stars that do not belong to any real sky. To walk its streets is to walk through the ghost of ordinary life, through the shape of everything the wanderer has lost, the home, the neighborhood, the safe familiar world, all of it here, all of it wrong, all of it empty. The houses stand dark and silent. The streets run on into more streets. The night never ends and the dawn never comes. And the wanderer walks through this endless echo of home with a grief that the sharper terrors of the other levels never touch. The grief of seeing everything you long for laid out before you, and knowing it is false, knowing it is empty, knowing that behind each ordinary door is not warmth and family and safety, but only dust and dark and the same wrongness that fills the whole country. And there is danger here too, for the level is not truly empty, and things move in the endless suburban night, in the dark houses, in the shadowed streets, but the deepest danger of the level is not its entities, but its sorrow, its terrible resemblance to home, its power to break the heart of a wanderer who has been so long away from everything they loved. Some who came to the suburbs, the accounts say, could not bear to leave, wandered the full streets looking for a house that might be theirs, a door that might open onto the life they lost, and found only more streets, more darkness, more of the endless aching echo of home. It is one of the cruelest of the levels, precisely because it is one of the gentlest, because it kills not with terror but with longing, because it takes the wanderer's deepest wish to go home, and shows it to them endlessly, falsely, under a sky that is not the sky, on streets that lead only to more streets, in a night that will not end, in a suburb that is the shape of everything lost and the substance of nothing at all. There is a level that opens impossibly onto the sky, or the memory of a sky, a level of open air after all the endless indoor dread, and it is one of the strangest gifts and strangest snares of the whole country. It is a field, a vast open field of tall grass or wheat under a wide, bright sky stretching to the horizon in every direction, an outdoor level in a country that is almost all interior, a breath of open air in a place of endless suffocating rooms, and to come upon it, after the yellow halls and the dark aisles and the narrow pipes, is to feel a wild and disbelieving joy. For here is sky, here is space, here is the open world one thought forever lost, the wind in the grass, the light of a sun, the vast and liberating horizon. But the field is a backrooms level, and so its openness is its own kind of trap, for it too is endless, and there is no horizon that can ever be reached, no edge, no exit visible in all that vastness, only the grass and the sky going on forever, so that the wanderer who walks into the field seeking its far side walks and walks and walks through identical grass under an identical sky, and never arrives anywhere at all. The very openness that brings such joy becomes, in time, its own despair, for in the endless rooms one can at least find walls, doors, features, a sense of progress, but in the endless field there is nothing, only the level horizon that never nears, the grass that never changes, the sky that never moves, a vastness so complete that it becomes its own kind of prison, a prison without walls, a prison made of pure open space. And there are dangers in the grass, things that move through it unseen, things that hunt in the golden vastness, so that even here the wanderer is not safe, even in the open air, even under the wide bright sky. The field teaches a strange and bitter lesson, that freedom itself can be a trap, that open space with no exit is only a larger cell, that the sky the wanderer longed for so desperately is, in the end, as false and as endless and as inescapable as the yellow halls. A beautiful bright lie of openness, a field with no far side, under a sun that gives light but leads nowhere, forever. And there is a level that is a city, a vast and endless metropolis of concrete and glass, of streets and buildings and towers stretching on forever, an entire abandoned city under a grey and sunless sky. And it is among the most impressive and the most desolate of all the places in the country. To come upon it is to come upon civilization itself, or its ghost, the whole apparatus of urban human life laid out on an infinite scale, streets and sidewalks and storefronts, offices and apartments and towers climbing into a colourless sky. All of it built for millions, all of it empty, all of it silent, a city with no citizens, a metropolis of the dead or the never were. The scale of it is staggering, and the emptiness of it is crushing, for a city is the most human of all our creations, the place where we gather in our millions, and a city emptied of every human soul is a monument to absence on a scale that dwarfs the mind. The wanderer who walks its streets walks through the ghost of everything humanity built. The shops and the homes and the towers, all waiting, all empty, all echoing with the footsteps of the one lost soul who walks where millions should be. And the city is dangerous, for its vastness hides vast dangers. Its endless buildings hide endless threats, and to be lost in an infinite city is a special kind of lost, a lost among the very structures built to gather and shelter us, turned now to a maze without end. Yet the city offers too the resources of a city, the shelter of its buildings, the salvage of its shops and homes, the countless places to hide and to rest. And some wanderers have made lives in its endless streets, small communities in the corners of the vast metropolis, lights in the windows of a city that had none. There is something in the city that captures the whole tragedy of the backrooms, the tragedy of human spaces without humanity, of the whole world we built standing empty and endless and wrong, waiting forever for the return of the life that made it, a return that will never come. The endless city stands, grey and silent under its colourless sky, street upon street upon street, tower upon empty tower, the greatest monument in all the country to the absence at its heart, the vast and echoing emptiness where a whole civilization should be. As we drift deeper, the levels grow stranger, and the strangeness itself becomes the danger, and we must dwell for a while in the deep uncanny, the region of the country where the levels stop being merely hostile and start being fundamentally wrong. For in the shallow levels, the danger is comprehensible, a beast, a darkness, a scarcity, a thing the mind can grasp and guard against. But in the deep levels, the danger is stranger, is subtler, is aimed not at the body but at the mind and the very sense of reality. There are levels down here where time does not behave, where the wanderer loses hours or days, or the very thread of when, where they arrive before they set out, or age or unage, or find that the passage they came by is no longer there and never was. There are levels where space does not behave, where the corridors loop back on themselves, where forward becomes backward, where the geometry of the place refuses the mind's attempt to hold it. There are levels where the very self begins to come apart, where the wanderer hears their own thoughts as voices, sees their own memories walking the halls, loses the boundary between what is real and what is dread. This is the deep uncanny, the region where the Backrooms reveals itself most fully as an alien place, a place that need not and does not obey the laws of the world we came from, a place where the tools of survival and finally the tools of sanity itself begin to fail. The wanderers who venture here, and there are few and fewer who return, speak of it with a haunted incoherence, for the deep levels resist the telling, resist the map, resist the very structure of a story, and to try to describe them is to feel the words themselves come loose. It is here, in the deep uncanny, that the true nature of the country presses most heavily upon the mind, the sense that the Backrooms is not a building or a trap, or even a world, but something stranger, something that does not care for our categories, something vast and alien and patient beneath the familiar yellow surface, of which the yellow halls and the warehouse and the pipes are only the shallowest edge, the doorway, the first thin skin over a depth that has no bottom and no name. And now we come to the deepest place the wanderers speak of, to the level they call, with weary hope and weary dread, the end. And to speak of it is to touch the very heart of what the whole long history is reaching toward, the question of escape, of arrival, of whether all this wandering leads anywhere at all. For the end is spoken of as a destination, a level at the bottom of everything, the place the deepest paths lead, and its very name holds a terrible ambiguity, for an end may be a goal reached or a life finished, a homecoming or a grave. Some of the wanderers believe the end is the way out, the true exit, the level from which one may at last leave the Backrooms and return to the world one fell from. And for these the end is a holy thing, a promised land, the object of the deepest hope in all the country, the belief that the endless descent has a bottom and the bottom has a door, and others believe it is something darker, a final level from which there is no return, an ending in the other sense, the place where the wandering simply stops, where the long descent finds not escape but termination, where the lost soul reaches at last the true and final bottom of the country and can go no deeper and cannot come back. The truth of the end. No living wanderer can tell, for those who have gone there have not returned to say, and this silence is itself the deepest part of the mystery, for it may mean they escaped, passed through the door and back into the world, and never troubled to send word, or it may mean they found the other kind of end, the kind from which no word is ever sent. The end stands at the bottom of the whole descent, as the great question mark of the country, the place where hope and despair become indistinguishable, where the longing for escape and the fear of oblivion converge on a single word. And perhaps that is fitting, for the whole history of the Backrooms is, in the end, a history of that convergence, of souls who fell out of the world and spent their lives seeking a way back, never knowing whether the seeking led toward home or toward a deeper and final dark, drifting downward, level by level, toward an end that might be salvation, or might be nothing, or might be both, waiting quietly at the bottom of everything, behind the last door. As the network of the M.E.G spread, certain of its outposts grew larger and more storied than the rest, becoming the great settlements of the country, the capitals, such as they were, of the lost. The first and most honoured was the base the wanderers spoke of as the beginning of everything, the original haven, held and defended across all the years, the place where the archives were kept, and the keepers tended the memory of the country, and the leaders of the group made what plans could be made against the endless dark. Around it and beyond it grew others, each with its own character, its own level, its own place in the fragile geography of safety. Some sat astride the great water sources and became the centres of the almond water trade, thronged with gatherers and traders and the constant traffic of the precious bottles. Some sat at the crossings between levels, near the hub or the other great junctions, and became way stations, places of passage, where travellers rested and news was exchanged, and the scattered threads of the country were woven together. And some sat at the very edge of the known, the frontier outposts, the last light before the unmapped dark, from which the explorers set out, and to which, sometimes, they returned. Each great outpost was a world unto itself, with its own leaders and its own laws, its own customs and quarrels and characters, its own hard-won balance of survival, and the whole loose confederation of them, connected by the travelled routes and the shared purpose and the common memory of the archives, formed the true body of the civilization, the scattered but living nation of the lost. To name them all would be to recite the whole roll of the country's brave attempts at home, for many rose and some fell, overrun or abandoned or swallowed when their levels turned, their people scattered again into the wandering dark, their names remembered only in the records of the keepers. But the great ones endured, held across the years by the stubborn labour of those who chose to stay and defend rather than wander on, and they stand in the history as the strongholds of the whole civilization, the fortresses of light against the endless dark, the places where the lost of many levels came at last to something that could, however grimly, be called home. And in their halls, beneath the buzzing lights, behind the fortified walls, the small, brave business of human life went on, the fetching of water and the standing of watch, the telling of stories and the burying of the dead, the whole daily labour of keeping a little warmth alive in the cold heart of the country behind the world. Not all who lived in the backrooms belonged to a group, for many, by choice or by circumstance, remained apart, and these were the free wanderers, the solitary travellers of the country, who owed no allegiance to the M.E.G or its rivals, and walked the levels alone or in small bands of their own. Some were free by necessity, souls who had never found a group, who wandered the halls as the earliest wanderers had, alone in the endless yellow, surviving on their own wit and their own luck. Some were free by choice, wanderers who distrusted the groups, who had been burned by the factions or the wars, who preferred the dangers of solitude to the entanglements of belonging, and some were free by temperament, restless souls who could not settle in an outpost, who felt the pull of the unmapped dark, who wandered ever onward not from any purpose, but from the deep need to keep moving, to see the next level, to walk where no one had walked. The free wanderers are, in a sense, the purest inheritors of the earliest tradition, the tradition of the first lost souls who walked the halls alone before any group existed, and their lives were the hardest of all, for they had no outpost to shelter them, no group to share their water, no watchers to guard their sleep, only themselves against the whole cruelty of the country. And yet they had, too, a kind of freedom the outpost dwellers lacked, the freedom of the open road, of the whole endless country to wander, of a life beholden to no faction and bound by no wall. They moved through the levels as ghosts, appearing at the outpost to trade and rest, and then vanishing again into the dark, carrying news and rumour and the occasional precious map, weaving, in their restless passage, some of the connections that held the scattered country together. Many of them died alone, of course, as the first wanderers died against some yellow wall in some forgotten level, their names known to no one, their stories lost. But some became legends, the great solitary travellers whose deeds passed from mouth to mouth in the outposts, who had seen levels no group had charted, who had survived what no one should survive, who wandered still, somewhere out in the endless dark, free and alone and unbound. the last true heirs of the oldest way of living in the country behind the world. There is a fact of the Backrooms that the wanderers speak of rarely and always softly, for it holds a grief and a strangeness beyond almost anything else in the whole history. And it is this, that in the outposts, over the years, children were born. For wherever human beings gather and endure, life continues and love continues, and from love comes new life. And so there came to be, in the lit havens of the country, children who had never fallen into the Backrooms at all, but had been born into it, to whom the endless yellow halls were not a nightmare fallen into, but simply the world, the only world, the world as it had always been. Imagine such a childhood, to be born beneath the buzzing lights, to grow up knowing no sky but the false skies of certain levels, no home but the fortified outpost, no safety but the discipline of light and silence, to learn the reading of the walls and the finding of the water and the vetting of strangers, not as hard-won survival skills, but as the simple facts of life, the way a child of the surface learns to cross a street. To these children, the surface world their parents mourned was a legend, a story, a paradise they had never seen and could scarcely believe in, the sun and the sky and the open air as fantastic to them as the Backrooms would be to a child of the surface. And there is a terrible tenderness in this, in the thought of the wanderers raising children in the worst place in creation, teaching them to survive, loving them fiercely in the endless dark, and grieving, surely, that they could give them no better world than this, no sky, no sun, no true home, only the halls and the hum and the hard-won safety of the outpost light. Some of these children, grown, became the fiercest of the wanderers, for they knew the country as their native land, understood it as no fallen soul could, moved through it with the ease of those who had never known anything else. And some, perhaps, longed all their lives for a world they had never seen, ached for the surface their parents described, sought the way out not to return to a lost home, but to reach a home they had only ever dreamed. The children behind the walls are among the quietest and saddest figures of the whole history, the true natives of the country, born into the nightmare, raised in the dark, heirs to a world their parents never wished on them, carrying forward, generation by generation, both the terrible inheritance of the Backrooms and the stubborn, unkillable warmth of the human hearts that made them. Among the many strange inhabitants of the country, the facelings are not alone, for they have kin, variations, other blank and human-shaped things that share their unsettling nature, and the wanderers came to know several of these faceless kindred, each with its own character and its own dread. There are the ones the wanderers called the dullers, faceless figures gentler and stranger even than the common facelings, that seem to drift through certain levels in a kind of dull and dreamlike passivity, harmless if unprovoked, and yet deeply unsettling in their vacancy, their utter absence of will or purpose or self. There are the wretches, the ones gone wrong, the faceless kin turned hostile, that hunt and harm where the common faceling merely wanders, that carry in their blank forms a malice the others lack. And there are stranger kin still, half glimpsed and half understood, the whole uncanny family of the human-shaped but not human, that populate the levels and blur forever the line between what is a person and what merely wears the shape of one. To move through the country is to move constantly among these kin, to see, down the endless halls, figures that might be human, and might be faceling, and might be something else entirely, and to live in the constant strain of not knowing, of having to judge, again and again, whether the shape ahead is friend or blank or threat. The faceless kin are perhaps the country's own people, the true population of the Backrooms, among whom the fallen humans are only a small and temporary intrusion, and their sheer number, their pervasiveness, their quiet occupation of level after level, is itself a kind of horror. The horror of realizing that the emptiness is not empty at all, that the halls one thought abandoned are peopled, thickly peopled, with things that wear our shape and share our spaces, and go about their blank, unknowable business all around us, forever. And there is the deepest fear again, the fear that runs beneath all the tales of the faceless, that they are what we become, that the wanderer who stays too long, who wanders too deep, who loses too much of the self to the endless sameness, joins them at last, becomes one of the blank and drifting kin, another faceless figure in the endless halls, another native of the country, their humanity worn away like a name scratched too long ago to read, until nothing remains but the shape, drifting on, through the world behind the world. We have spoken of the first graves, but the honouring of the dead grew, over the years, into something richer and more formal, into the rites of the country, the customs by which the wanderers laid their loss to rest and kept their memory alive. For in a place so full of death, the treatment of the dead became a matter of deep importance, a way for the living to affirm against all the country's cruelty that a life had mattered, that a soul was more than food for the entities or fuel for the endless halls. The rites varied from outpost to outpost, from group to group, as such things always do, but certain customs ran through them all. The dead were laid in quiet rooms, and the rooms were closed and marked, and the names of the dead were recorded in the archives of the keepers and on the walls of the levels, so that they would not be forgotten. The things the dead had carried were gathered and, according to custom, either passed to the living who needed them or kept as remembrances. The precious bottle, the trusty torch, the scrap of writing in a familiar hand, and words were spoken or written over the lost, words of grief and honour and farewell, the simple human need to say goodbye given form even in the depths of the country. Some outposts kept walls of remembrance, whole surfaces given over to the names of their dead, growing longer year by year, a solemn record of all the souls the country had taken from that place. Some kept the custom of the last message, the practice of ensuring that every wanderer, before setting out on a dangerous journey, left the words behind, so that if they did not return, something of them would remain, and all of them shared the deepest rite of all, the rite of remembrance, the telling and retelling of the dead in the stories of the living, so that the lost lived on in memory, in the tales told in the lit outposts, in the names passed down, in the warnings and the wisdom they had left behind. The rites of the dead are, in their way, the very heart of the culture of survival, for they are the wanderer's answer to the deepest cruelty of the country, the cruelty of a place that would erase every soul without trace, that would let the dead vanish as if they had never been. Against that erasure, the wanderers set their rites, their names, their walls of remembrance, their stubborn refusal to forget. And in doing so, they claimed, for their dead and for themselves, the one thing the Backrooms could never wholly take, the dignity of being remembered, the small eternal victory of the name that outlasts the death. Every land has its legends, and the Backrooms, for all its horror, is no exception, for the wanderers, gathered in the lit outposts in the long hours, told stories, and the stories grew, over the years, into a whole body of legend, the folklore of the country behind the world. There were the legends of the great wanderers, the solitary travellers who had seen impossible levels and survived impossible dangers, whose deeds passed from mouth to mouth until they became larger than any life, the heroes of a country that badly needed heroes. There were the legends of the lost outposts, the havens overrun or vanished, remembered in story as golden places, safe and warm, that had fallen to some great disaster, their fall told and retold as warning and lament. There were the legends of the deep levels, the tales brought back by the few who ventured furthest, embroidered and exaggerated in the telling, until no one could say where truth ended and story began. Tales of levels of impossible beauty or impossible horror, of the end and its door, of the very bottom of the country. And there were the legends of escape, the most precious of all, the stories of those who had found the way out, who had clipped back into the world and gone home. Stories always second-hand, always unverifiable, always half-believed, told and retold because the wanderers needed to believe them, needed to hold to the hope that escape was real. The legends of the country served the wanderers as legends always serve, giving shape to their fears and their hopes, their heroes and their warnings, weaving the scattered experiences of a scattered people into a shared story, a common inheritance, a way of understanding the strange land they lived in. Some of the legends were surely true, or true enough. Hardened kernels of real events grown a story shell around them. Some were surely false, comforts and terrors invented in the long hours, believed because they were needed. And most were somewhere between, the way legends always are, neither wholly true nor wholly false, but something else, something truer than fact, the distilled wisdom and fear and hope of a whole people, passed down in story from wanderer to wanderer, keeping alive, in a country that forgets everything, the memory and the meaning of the lost. To listen to the legends of the Backrooms is to hear the country dreaming of itself, telling itself who its heroes were and what its dangers are, and whether, at the end of everything, there is any way home. Let us rise now from the deep places and speak of the living, of the culture that grew up among the wanderers. For it is easy, in reciting the horrors, to forget that human beings made lives here, real lives, with customs and comforts and kindnesses, in the teeth of all the dread. The culture of survival that developed in the Backrooms is a remarkable thing, a whole way of living forged from nothing, in a country that offered nothing, by people who had lost everything. It began with the almond water, the shared reverence for that one mercy, the whole ritual and economy of finding it, hoarding it, sharing it, trusting it, or fearing it. And around this single substance the wanderers built a culture of scarcity and care, of the precious things shared, of the bottle passed from hand to hand. It grew through the disciplines of survival, the reverence for light, the mastery of silence, the reading of the walls, the vetting of strangers, each discipline a hard-won piece of communal wisdom, taught and learned and passed down, the accumulated art of staying alive. And it flowered, wherever the wanderers gathered, into something more than mere survival, into the small, warm customs of community, the sharing of stories in the lit outposts, the honoring of the dead, the welcoming of the lost, the slow building of trust and friendship, and even, sometimes, love, in the unlikeliest of all places for love to grow. For human beings will make a life anywhere, will find or make warmth in the coldest places, will gather and tell stories and care for one another even at the bottom of the world. And this is perhaps the truest and most hopeful thread in the whole dark history of the Backrooms, that the emptiness never fully won, that the wanderers never became merely prey or merely survivors, but remained in their gatherings and their kindnesses and their stubborn small joys, human, fully and defiantly human, in a place designed, it sometimes seemed, to strip humanity away. The culture of survival is the answer the wanderers gave to the country's cruelty, and it is a good answer, a brave answer, the answer of light against dark, of memory against forgetting, of community against the endless isolating halls, of the warm and stubborn human heart against the vast indifferent architecture of the world behind the world. We return again to the almond water, for it deserves a fuller telling, being the single thread that runs through the whole economy and culture and politics of the country. In a place where death by thirst and by the sickness of the levels is a constant threat, the almond water is not merely valuable but sacred, the one substance that stands between the wanderer and a slow dissolution, and around it grew the whole strange commerce of the lost. Some wanderers became gatherers, specialists in finding the water, who learned the levels where it pooled and the signs that marked its presence, the death moths gathering, the particular kind of forgotten corner where a bottle might wait. Some became traders, moving the water between the levels and the outposts, carrying it along the known routes, exchanging it for the other goods of the country. And some, in the darker corners of the story, became hoarders and profiteers, controlling the supply, using the desperate need of others as a source of power. For in a country where water is life, the one who controls the water controls much, and the almond water trade was not always a gentle thing. The great groups understood this well, and the securing of water sources was among their chief concerns, the reason for many an outpost's placement, the object of much of the tension and conflict between the factions. To hold a reliable source of almond water was to hold the true wealth of the country, and to be cut off from it was to face the oldest death of all, and woven through the whole trade was the constant shadow of the false water, the look-alike that ruined those who drank it, so that the almond water commerce was also a commerce of trust, of reputation, of knowing whose water could be trusted and whose might be the sweet poison. And the trader who dealt honestly in true water was valued beyond price, while the one who passed off the false was the lowest of all the country's villains. The almond water trade is the economic spine of the whole civilization, the flow of the one essential thing through the veins of the scattered country, and to follow it is to follow the deepest currents of Backrooms life, the currents of need and trust and power and survival, all of them running, in the end, from the same source, the desperate and universal thirst of souls lost in a country that offers, of its own accord, nothing at all to drink. We have touched on the tensions between the groups, but we must speak plainly of the darkest fruit of those tensions. The wars, for the history of the Backrooms, is not only a history of survival against the entities and the emptiness, but a history of the lost turning, at times, against one another. In a country of such scarcity, where water and safety and territory are all in desperate short supply, conflict was perhaps inevitable, and the great groups, the M.E.G and its rivals, the Lost Legion and the rest, did not always coexist in peace. There were disputes over territory, over the safe levels and the water sources and the strategic crossings. There were raids and reprisals, and the slow poisoning of relations between factions that needed the same scarce things. And there were, in the worst of it, true conflicts, fought room by room in the endless halls, wanderer against wanderer, group against group, over the meagre wealth of a country that had barely enough for anyone. The wars of the levels are among the saddest chapters of the whole history, for they represent the triumph, however partial and however temporary, of the country's cruelty over the wanderer's better nature, the moment when the endless scarcity and fear turned the lost against each other, when the survivors of a shared catastrophe became each other's enemies. And they raise the hardest question the history poses, the question of whether the human capacity for division and violence is stronger even than the shared bond of the lost, whether even here, at the bottom of the world, facing a common and terrible enemy, human beings will still find reasons to fight one another. The answer, the history suggests, is a painful and complicated one, for the wanderers both did and did not overcome their divisions, made war and made peace, fought and cooperated, betrayed and stood by one another, in all the tangled contradiction of the human heart. The wars of the levels are the shadow side of the whole hopeful story of the groups and the outposts and the culture of survival, the reminder that the light the wanderers kindled against the dark was always a flickering and imperfect light, that the civilization they built was always fragile, always threatened, not only by the entities and the emptiness, but by the oldest enemy of all, the darkness in themselves. Beyond the numbered and the charted, beyond the levels the wanderers know well enough to name, lies the vast and mostly unknown depth of the country, the deeper levels, and to speak of them is to speak largely of mystery, for they are the frontier, the edge of the known, the region into which the boldest explorers venture and from which the fewest return. The Backrooms, the wanderers came to understand, is not a place of a few dozen levels or even a few hundred, but a place of levels beyond counting, an endless descent, each level giving onto others, the whole forming a vast and possibly infinite structure, whose full extent no map has ever captured, and no mind has ever grasped. The known levels, the ones we have walked together, are only the shallowest skin of this immensity, the first few steps down an endless stair, and beyond them the levels stretch away into strangeness and darkness and depths no wanderer has plumbed. The deeper one goes, the accounts agree, the stranger the levels become, the further from anything the human mind can hold, until the very concepts of level and place and geography begin to break down, and the explorer finds themselves in regions that resist all description. Some believe the deeper levels grow more dangerous the further down one goes, that the entities grow stranger, and the hazards grow subtler, and the mind-breaking uncanniness grows deeper with each descent. Some believe there are levels down there that no human being has ever seen or ever will, levels that exist beyond the reach of any wanderer, in the true depths of the country. And some believe that somewhere in that endless descent lies the answer to everything, the end, the exit, the truth of what the Backrooms is and why, waiting at a bottom that may or may not exist. The deeper levels stand, in the whole geography of the country, as the great unknown, the frontier of all knowledge, the place where the maps run out and the explorers vanish and the mystery deepens with every step. And they beckon still, as frontiers always beckon, drawing the bold and the desperate and the curious ever downward into the strange and endless depths, in search of water or safety or knowledge or escape, or simply because the depths are there and unknown, and the human heart cannot rest while a mystery remains unplumbed, even in the worst place in all creation, even at the bottom of the world, through the whole long history, beneath all the wandering and the surviving and the building and the fighting, runs one deep and constant current, the oldest and most powerful longing of all the lost, the longing to go home. And there have always been those who devoted their lives not to survival for its own sake, but to the search for the way out. For the wanderers never forgot the world they fell from, never stopped aching for it, the sky and the sun and the faces of those they loved. And beneath every outpost and every trade and every small, hard-won comfort of the Backrooms lay the unspoken hope that this was not forever, that somewhere there was a door, a passage, a way back to the solid world. And so there arose among the wanderers, the seekers, those who made the way out their life's whole purpose, who studied the levels not for water or safety but for exits, who followed every rumor of a passage home, who ventured into the deepest and most dangerous places on the strength of a legend that somewhere down there, or up there, or through there, lay the door back to the world. Some sought the way out through the deep levels, believing the end was the exit, descending forever toward a bottom that might be home. Some sought it through the strange geometry of the shallow levels, believing that the same carelessness that let one fall in might, rightly understood, let one clip back out. Some sought it in the almond water, in the entities, in the very structure of the place, in any clue that might reveal the crack through which one might escape. And a very few, the legends say, found it, clipped back through some soft place in the world, and woke again in the solid world they had lost, though these tales are always second-hand, always unverifiable, always the story of someone else, someone gone, someone who left and never sent word. The seekers of the way out are, in a sense, the truest heroes of the whole history, for they refused to accept the country as their fate, refused to make peace with the endless halls, and gave their lives, most of them, to the hardest and most hopeless quest of all, the quest to undo the fall, to find the door, to go home. And whether any truly succeeded, whether the way out is real or only the last and kindest of the country's illusions, no living wanderer can say, and perhaps that unknowing is itself the point. For as long as the way out remains possible, however faintly, the wanderers can hope, and hope, in the backrooms, is the rarest and most precious water of all. Let us dwell, before we drift toward our own ending, on the deepest question the whole history poses, the question that haunts every wanderer and every group and every level, the question of escape, of whether it is possible to leave the backrooms at all. It is the question that shapes the whole culture of the country, for a people who believed escape was possible would live one way, always seeking, always hoping, always straining toward the door, while a people who believed escape was impossible would live another, making peace with the halls, building what home they could in a place they would never leave. And the wanderers across all the years have believed both and lived both, and never resolved the question, for the truth of it lies beyond any wanderer's certain knowledge. The evidence for escape is thin and tantalizing. The second-hand tales of those who clip back out, the belief that the same accident that brings one in might carry one back, the hope invested in the end and its promise of a door. And the evidence against is heavy and constant, the vast numbers of the lost who never returned, the endless depth of the country that seems to have no bottom and no edge, the sense, in the deep levels, of a place too vast and too strange ever to be escaped. Perhaps escape is possible and rare, and the way out exists for those who can find it, and the country is a maze with an exit, however hidden. Or perhaps escape is impossible, and the tales of return are only comforting lies, and the country is a trap without a door, and every wanderer who falls in forever. Or perhaps, and this is the strangest thought of all, the question has no single answer, and the way out exists for some and not for others, or exists sometimes and not others, or exists only for those who stop seeking it, or only for those who never stop, in the uncertain and unrule-bound logic of a place that need not obey any law we know. The question of escape is the great unanswered question at the heart of the whole history, and it will remain unanswered, for it can only be answered by leaving, and those who leave, if any do, do not return to tell us how. And so the wanderers live, as we all live, in uncertainty, hoping without proof, seeking without promise, holding to the possibility of home as the one warm ember in all the cold, the possibility that the fall can be undone, that the door can be found, that somewhere at the top or the bottom or through some soft place in the endless walls, the world we lost is waiting still. We have wandered far together, through the yellow country and the warehouse and the pipes, through the levels and the entities and the groups, down toward the deep places and the end. And now, before we drift out, let us ask the last and largest question, the question the whole history circles and never quite answers, the question of what the Backrooms is. For all our mapping and surviving and theorizing, this remains the deepest mystery of all, and the wanderers have wondered at it since the first fall, turning it over in the quiet hours, seeking in the very nature of the place some clue to their fate. Some have thought it a place, simply a place, a vast and hidden architecture behind or beneath or beside the world, into which one may fall by accident and wander until one dies or escapes, a geography like any other, only larger and stranger and crueler. Some have thought it something more, a kind of purgatory, a place between, where lost souls go, neither living nor dead, to wander in punishment or trial or simple abandonment, and the endless halls are the halls of an afterlife no scripture named. Some have thought it a living thing, or the working of a living thing, a place that is aware, that hunts, that lures, that turns our own longings against us with a cruelty too pointed to be accident, a country with a will, and that will not kind. And some have thought it beyond all such categories, a thing that our human concepts simply cannot hold, neither place, nor purgatory, nor beast, but something else, something alien and vast and indifferent, of which the yellow halls are only the smallest visible edge, and the truth of which no human mind, trapped inside it, can ever grasp. What the Backrooms is, we do not know, and perhaps cannot know, for to understand it fully might require standing outside it, and no one who is inside it can do that, and no one who has left, if any has ever explained. It remains the great mystery at the bottom of the whole story, the unanswered question behind every level and every death and every scratched word on every wall, the question that the wanderers carry with them through all their wandering, and take with them, unanswered, into the end, whatever the end may be. And perhaps that is the final and truest horror of the Backrooms, not the smilers or the hounds or the endless halls, but the not knowing, the sense of being lost in a place whose very nature is a mystery, of suffering and surviving and dying in a country whose purpose, if it has one, is forever hidden, behind the wallpaper, behind the hum, behind the last door at the bottom of the world. Thank you for drifting slowly through the timeline with me. We have come a long way together, down through the yellow country and the warehouse and the pipes, through the smilers and the hounds and the facelings and the partygoers, past the pool rooms and level fun and the endless city, down toward the deep uncanny and the end and the great unanswered question of it all. And now, gently, we come to rest. If you have made it this far, if you are still here in the quiet with me, drop a comment below and tell me where you are watching from, and which level, which era, which small piece of this long, strange history stayed with you most, whether it was the first fall, or the almond water found in the dark, or the words scratched on the walls by the lost for the lost, or the beautiful blue silence of the pool rooms. And if these drifting hours have given you rest, follow along and stay with me for more journeys through the lore that lives in the quiet hours, the histories that are best heard slowly in the dark, on the edge of sleep. The halls go on forever, but you do not have to walk them tonight. Tonight you may simply rest, here, in the warm, safe world you have not lost, with the sky still above you and the door still open behind you, and let the endless yellow country be only a story, only a drifting, only a soft, strange dream to carry you down into sleep. Remember, if you remember anything, the one warm thread that runs through all that cold, the words the lost left for one another on the walls of the world behind the world, the oldest and truest message of the whole long history. You are not the first. You are not alone. Others have come before, and others will come after, and the light, however small, is always worth the keeping. So rest now. Let the room grow soft around you. Let your eyes close, and let the hum fade, and let the halls grow far away. This has been the complete timeline of the Backrooms. Thank you for listening. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and never forget that some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed again. The story may be over, but its echoes will whisper in the quiet hours for generations to come.